Get out if you can't even handle the chores.
Henry yelled at me, his anger taking over. Exhausted from my night shift, I forced myself to muster some energy. Henry always thinks only of himself. Fine, I'll pack up and leave. That night, hello? Yes? As I answered the phone, I heard Henry's voice frantic and rushed.
Ava, where are you right now?
Henry kept pressing, demanding to know. At that moment, I couldn't help but let out a chuckle. I am Ava, a 55-year-old nurse. My only family is my husband Henry. He works for a major beverage manufacturer and always finishes work at 6 p.m. sharp. Henry hates wasting time and cherishes his own, so he's indifferent to others staying late at work. We met through a mutual acquaintance. I was drawn to Henry almost immediately. Before we married, Henry was always kind to me. For instance, when we walked together, he always took the side closest to the road. And when I carried shopping bags, he would offer his help.
Need help? I can carry that if it's heavy,
he'd say, taking the bags from me. Thank you. I was genuinely grateful for Henry's kindness. After our third date, we started dating. And 6 months later, Henry proposed. I thought it was too soon, but by then, I was deeply in love with him. So, I want to marry you too, Henry, I said. Henry seemed overjoyed by my response.
I'm so happy. Let's make a great future together,
he said, smiling at me. Seeing his smile, I couldn't help but smile back. I believed life with him would be a joyful marriage. At that time, I had no doubts about that. But soon after getting married, Henry showed his true colors. It seemed he had been hiding them before the marriage. Afterward, kindness and consideration disappeared. Firstly, Henry didn't do any household chores. He was always bossy and arrogant.
The household is your job, isn't it? Don't be so entitled.
That was Henry's constant refrain. Even when I was clearly struggling with the chores, Henry just ignored me and watched TV.
A man is out there fighting at work. Supporting that is your job,
he'd say, doing nothing else. He'd just open the newspaper and read it with an air of superiority. I'm working too, as a nurse. My job includes overtime and night shifts, so I have even less free time than Henry, who always leaves work on time. Moreover, Henry insists that I pay half of all expenses, except for housing costs. So I can't just be a housewife. That's why I once challenged Henry. I work too, you know. I'm not asking for a 50-50 split on chores, but could you help out a bit? I pleaded with Henry, but my request was met with disdain. Henry scoffed and belittled me.
Do you think you're fully contributing? Don't get ahead of yourself just because you're a woman. You're not even doing much. Want me to throw you out if you keep complaining?
Henry's words silenced me. I'd be lost without a home if he threw me out. My parents are gone, and I have no family home to return to. The hospital doesn't offer staff accommodations, so I'd be on the streets. At that time, affordable business hotels weren't common in my area. So, I'm sorry. All I could do was apologize. Since then, I've been under Henry's thumb. All household duties became my responsibility. Now, after more than 20 years of marriage to Henry, a new problem has emerged. A financial issue. Again, this month, the living expenses aren't in the account. I muttered, turning pale as I checked the bank book. Henry and I split the living costs. We each contribute the same amount to a joint account, from which we pay monthly bills for utilities and groceries. Henry took care of the mortgage in full. It used to work out with a split, but recently there's been a problem. Henry stopped contributing his share for living expenses. Once, the management company informed us that they couldn't make a withdrawal. In a panic, I checked the bank book to find Henry's share of living expenses wasn't deposited. I thought it was just a forgotten transfer. The living expenses for this month haven't been deposited, have they? I casually asked. Henry didn't seem flustered and replied calmly.
I forgot. I'll deposit it later. Can you cover for me in the meantime?
So without suspicion, I covered Henry's share from my savings. But when this happened repeatedly, I started to feel uneasy. Something was definitely off. And covering the expenses time after time was a significant burden for me. Determined, I decided to confront Henry. Henry, the living expenses for this month haven't been deposited again. Henry, who had been watching TV, turned around and replied nonchalantly.
Cover it for me, will you? I'm at a good part on the TV. Don't bother me.
With that, he shifted his gaze back to the TV. After a while, I heard Henry laughing loudly at something on television. My patience reached its breaking point. Enough already! Can't you see we're discussing something important? Always covering the living expenses is a burden on me. Please make the deposit. I was practically shouting. Then Henry, who had been calmly watching TV, suddenly became furious. He glared at me fiercely and said,
Don't you ever think about supporting me? All you talk about is money. Cut the nonsense.
Henry's face turned beet red with anger. I was taken aback by his sudden outburst. After all, it was Henry who suggested we split the living expenses. So I argued back. Support you? You work for a major company and you earn more, right? What are you spending all your money on that you can't contribute to the living expenses? I questioned Henry. I work part-time to limit my night shifts, ending up with more day shifts than a full-time nurse. Henry holds a managerial position and should be earning much more than me. Yet his inability to contribute his share to the living expenses seemed suspicious. I really wondered what he was spending his money on. I stared at Henry intently, and he became even angrier, saying,
It's my money. I can spend it however I want. You just need to keep quiet and do as you're told. Remember, I'm the one paying for this house's mortgage. I'm feeling irritated, so I'm going out. Make sure you handle the money.
With those parting words, Henry left the house. It seemed unlikely that I would receive any contribution for the living expenses this month either. A sigh was all I could muster, facing the uncertainty of how long this would go on. Henry continued to not contribute to the living expenses. It's been over a year now. This marriage might be nearing its end. I found myself muttering such thoughts more frequently. Henry and I have been together for over 20 years. There's a certain level of affection, of course, but he doesn't do any household chores. He works for a major company and should be earning a significant salary, yet he doesn't contribute a penny to the living expenses. It's highly questionable whether such a husband has any value. However, the house is registered in Henry's name. He is the one paying the mortgage. So when Henry feels his position is threatened, he falls back on,
I'll throw you out of this house, you know. Are you okay with that?
And he used to say that as if it were a catchphrase. He knows that saying this will make me comply. If it comes to divorce, it's certain that I'll be the one to leave. With no family home to turn to, I'm at a loss about what to do. Then, one Sunday, I'm home. After a rare night shift, I returned to the house. It was past 10 a.m., but there was no sound coming from Henry's room. He must still be asleep. We have different lifestyles, so we sleep in separate rooms. Trying not to wake Henry, I quietly went back to my own room. Then, about a half an hour into my sleep, I was jolted awake by someone pounding fiercely on my bedroom door.
Hey, Ava, you're home, right? Open up now.
Henry kept pounding on the door, shouting those words. I've only slept for an hour. Rubbing my sleepy eyes, I opened the door to my room. What's the matter? As I asked Henry, He glared at me and said disdainfully,
"You're always sleeping. Get up and make my breakfast. Isn't that your job?"
His attitude was so appalling that even I couldn't help but retort, "I just got back from a night shift and have only slept for an hour. Besides, there should be food I prepared last night in the freezer. Can't you just heat it up in the microwave and eat it yourself?" I was sleep deprived and had a headache. I always prepare Henry's meals in advance and freeze them when I have night shifts. I've asked Henry several times just to heat his own food, but today Henry was different.
"You always find ways to shirk your household duties. Make sure you have a hot meal ready when I wake up. Household chores are your responsibility, right? And look at this place. It's filthy. Get up and clean."
Henry yelled at me with a stern voice. Normally, I would apologize immediately, but today, my headache was severe and I was exhausted. So, inadvertently, my true feelings slipped out. "Can't you just let me rest for a bit? It's just warming up food. Even you can do that, Henry. Please just handle it." Henry laughed condescendingly.
"You think you can talk to me like that? Want me to throw you out of this house?"
He was mocking, probably thinking it would make me comply as usual. But not this time. I spoke firmly. "Go ahead, please." At my refusal to obey, Henry's face quickly turned bright red with anger.
"If you can't even manage the housework, get out. I don't need a wife who can't cook or clean properly."
Henry shouted at me, his anger unabated. Exhausted from my night shift, I forced myself to muster some energy. Henry always thinks only of himself. Perhaps it's time to let go of such a husband. "Fine, I'll pack up and leave," I declared firmly to Henry.
"You don't have the guts to leave this house. I'm going out. I won't be back for a while, so reflect on your actions and clean up."
Henry ordered me, probably thinking I had nowhere to go without my family home. But he was mistaken. I'm not the kind of woman who stays silent after being treated like this, especially after harboring over 20 years of resentment. This could be the right moment to fight back. Henry should do some reflecting too. I muttered under my breath. That night, Henry called several times. Another call from Henry. I ignored Henry's calls, but even after ignoring him, it wasn't a minute before the phone rang again. Henry seemed to be in a real panic. His calls were relentless. Reluctantly, I decided to answer the phone. "Hello, yes?" As I picked up, I could hear Henry's voice filled with panic.
"Ava, where are you right now?"
Henry kept pressing me persistently. At that moment, I couldn't help but let out a chuckle. "I'm at a business hotel. Why?" I answered calmly.
"What? A business hotel?"
I could hear the shock in Henry's voice over the phone. No wonder. He thought I couldn't leave the house. As soon as Henry left, I started packing my things. I stuffed my essential clothes and valuables into my suitcase one after another. At the same time, I contacted a recycling shop. I want to sell all the household appliances and furniture in the house right now. That's what I asked the recycling shop. Fortunately, I contacted a company that does emergency services, so they responded immediately. They finished the job in just a few hours, which I was truly grateful for. Though I had to pay a premium for the urgent service and some disposal fees, I was still satisfied with the money I spent. It looks clean now. The house was completely empty. All the furniture and appliances were gone, leaving only Henry's clothes and personal items. That's why, when Henry saw the state of the house, he erupted in anger.
"All the appliances and furniture in the house are gone. How am I supposed to live like this?"
Surely he'd be in trouble without even a washing machine or refrigerator, but that's not my concern anymore. So I answered with a laugh. "Huh? I bought all that furniture and appliances. I think it's my right to sell them. I did leave your stuff untouched, didn't I?"
"Well, that's..."
Henry seemed rattled, having hit a sore spot. All the furniture and appliances in the house were purchased with my savings before I got married. When we got married,
I'm buying the house, so you should buy all the furniture and appliances,
Henry told me. Back then, I didn't object because Henry was making a big purchase with the house. Plus, working for a major company, it was easier for Henry to get a mortgage approved. So I thought it best to do as Henry said. That's why I purchased everything, including the furniture in Henry's room. Given the circumstances, all the furniture and appliances were originally mine. Selling them off isn't a problem at all. As I explained this matter-of-factly, Henry shouted,
"Getting all high and mighty just because you're a woman? This little escape of yours is only for now, you know? If you don't apologize immediately, it's divorce. Buy new furniture and appliances right now. And if you come back, apologize, cry, and beg for forgiveness. I might just let you back in the house."
Henry laughed with an air of triumph, but I was not intimidated. Divorce is fine by me. In fact, Henry, you'll be the one in trouble if we divorce, right? You have debts, don't you? I revealed Henry's secret calmly.
"How did you know about that?"
Henry's voice trembled with evident agitation. "Just today, while cleaning up your room, I stumbled upon a pile of demand letters." I relayed the information calmly. Both the recycling shop worker and I were shocked when a huge stack of demand letters emerged from under Henry's bed. Upon nervously opening the envelopes, it became clear there was a debt amounting to several $100,000. Moreover, it seemed he had borrowed from multiple consumer finance companies with an alarming amount of interest accumulating. The reason for the debt was probably stock trading. Documents from a securities company were found along with the demand letters, indicating significant losses. As I laid out the facts, Henry resignedly confessed.
"At first, things were going well, but then I suffered a huge loss. No matter how hard I tried to recoup, it just didn't work out."
Henry's voice gradually faded. I sighed deeply at Henry's confession. The reason for his constant dodging of living expenses recently must be to repay this debt. With the interest piling up, his monthly salary would be swallowed up just by the interest payments. It's divorce anyway, so it's none of my concern now, I muttered softly. Then Henry quickly retorted in desperation.
"Do you really think it's okay to divorce me? Yes, I have debts, but that's something retirement benefits can handle. I've worked for decades, and I'll have a substantial retirement fund. Plus, I'm an elite from a major company. You won't find a husband with such good conditions again."
Henry took pride in his position at a major company. That's why he maintained an air of triumph. Does he still have the energy to say such things? I asked Henry incredulously. Your position at a major company won't last much longer, right? You're only a few months away from mandatory retirement. What value will you have once you lose that title?
"What did you say?"
Henry replied, irritated. I decided to confront him with the harsh truth. You don't do any household chores. You don't contribute to living expenses. And now you have debts. Your value isn't just zero, it's negative. Far from being a good catch, you're a bad debt. Henry tried to argue back.
"Don't joke with me. There's a reemployment system, and I'm an elite. The company still needs me. Just mentioning my company's name makes me popular with women. Unlike you, I compete with my brain, not physical labor."
Henry boasted arrogantly. Don't belittle physical labor. Nursing is a critical job. Constantly dealing with patients' lives. I have no reason to be looked down upon by you. And as far as the reemployment system, it might be difficult for you, Henry, especially since you can't even compete intellectually. I conveyed this calmly.
"What did you say?"
I could hear Henry's voice wavering faintly. Well, Henry, you always leave work on time, don't you? Ignoring others who are doing overtime. I don't think the company would want to keep someone so uncooperative. I've heard that the peer evaluations matter a lot. And with the reemployment system, Salaries often drop significantly, so won't you struggle to repay your debts? At my words, Henry crumbled. While boasting about competing with his brain, it seemed Henry hadn't properly researched the reemployment system. The documents in the room showed that with Henry's current conditions, it would be difficult. Especially in terms of salary, it would be a disaster. I was surprised that Henry hadn't read the documents properly and was appalled at such shallow thinking.
What now? If the reemployment system doesn't work out, what will become of me? I'll lose the title of an elite at a major corporation.
Henry's voice, once assertive, suddenly became feeble. I don't know, and it doesn't concern me anymore. I've been working part-time until now, but next month I start as a full-time employee. I don't have to take care of you anymore. Our hospital's retirement age is 70, so I can still work for a long time. As I spoke indifferently, Henry's voice turned pleading.
You're becoming a full-time employee, so your salary will increase, right?
Henry asked, his voice filled with hope. Well, yes, it will, and there will be bonuses too. As I responded, Henry became even more desperate.
I was wrong before. I apologize. Let's start over. I can't pay off the debt by myself anymore. It's retirement age, and changing jobs now would be difficult. Help me, please.
I was disgusted by Henry's blatant change of attitude. Start over? Why would I do that now? Henry, you're only clinging to me for your own sake. I rejected Henry firmly.
Don't say that, please. Haven't we been together for over 20 years? I need you, Ava. Without you, things will get really bad for me. Do you not care what happens to me?
Henry pleaded tearfully. Henry's future would be devoid of his elite title at a major corporation, with only a mountain of debt remaining. Predicting such a bleak future, he was desperate. Probably no one but me could help Henry, but I had no sympathy for Henry. Emotionally, he was already a stranger to me. Just like I suffered for over 20 years, I thought it was only fair for Henry to suffer too. Let's handle the rest through a lawyer. That was all I said before hanging up the phone. After that, our divorce proceeded smoothly. Having a lawyer involved seemed to facilitate the process. Henry was always weak against titles, so in front of a lawyer, he couldn't put on a strong front. And Henry had something to hide. Actually, after involving the lawyer, it turns out the real debt was not just a few $100,000, but much more. Besides the demand letters I saw, there were several other debts. According to the lawyer, Henry is proceeding with bankruptcy proceedings. It seems he's reached a point where he can't repay his debts anymore. After that, his company found out, and Henry was fired. Henry had also been defaulting on his debt repayments. Of course, he hadn't been paying the mortgage either. It appears that until now, he hadn't been repaying his debts, instead pouring all his salary into gambling. Therefore, he hadn't even been paying the interest. Henry's idea was,
I'll increase the money significantly and then repay all the debts at once.
But eventually the company started receiving collection calls for him repeatedly. It seems he was fired because this was causing disruption to the company's operations. I truly feel it was right to divorce Henry. I've received several messages from Henry through the lawyer. He is currently losing his house due to bankruptcy. Henry, having lost his job, house, and everything else, wants me to help him somehow. He seems to be in a dire situation all on his own. Of course, I've politely declined through the lawyer. After all, Henry and I are already divorced. I really wonder how he has the audacity to ask for such things now. Meanwhile, I continue to work as a nurse. The recent change in my life is that I moved closer to the hospital. In fact, I've purchased a small apartment. It was quite affordable due to its age. This room is my very own castle. No worries about being kicked out by anyone. That alone brings me a sense of security and happiness. My current joy is searching for cute interior decorations that would suit my place. Today, on my day off, I'm browsing through interior shops. How cute is this? I find a charming candle that excites me. There may be many challenges ahead, but now I have a place to return to where I can feel secure. Determined to protect this place, I resolved to work hard today as well. That was what I felt.